Hey guys, forgot to put my mic on. Welcome to our Facebook Live. I'll fix that in just a second when Brian's talking. Hey guys, welcome to our Facebook Live. Atheism Exposed. Um, it's it's enjoyable to put this content out because I know what it'll do for so many people and how it will help so many people. At the same time, it's almost difficult to let atheists expose themselves as they're going to do in this evening on this webcast. It's almost difficult to let them do that or watch them do that when they're claiming things that are just so. I don't want to use a word that sounds too mean. I really don't. But the word absurd comes to my mind because they are. Now, I appreciate their honesty. They're taking atheism to its logical conclusion, but it's just really difficult to watch them do that. Brian, we did a episode or just did a Facebook Live just a couple days ago, kind of went through the 15 core tenets of atheism. And this really is something. We had atheists argue with us about this. We had atheists come on and say, well, that's not really what atheism means. So as we get into this and we talk about the 15 core tenets of atheism, kind of going into this and showing atheists expose themselves, is there anything you're thinking that you want to help set this up with, knowing the conversation we've had with atheists over the last few days as well?
Well, two things come to mind. The first of all is that these are conversations that you and I and many other Christian apologists have had for many, many years. That this hasn't been done in a vacuum. That we've known atheists in person and talked to them in person. We've talked to a lot of them online via social media, email conversations, that kind of thing. So I wanted to show with this collection of video clips we're going to share tonight that the things that I'm saying about the atheist faith is not something that I just invented out of the blue. Now, on one hand, I did just sort of follow the logic where it went and say, well, if atheism is true, where would it lead? But then I'm able to show that these are things that atheists say about their own worldview. That there are people who will say, well, that's not what I mean when I say atheism, or that's not what I believe, that's not my worldview. And I get that people use different words in different ways. But what I'm showing and what we're going to show tonight is that the worldview of atheism, as I described in the 15 core tenets of Orthodox atheism, are things that atheists themselves. So here it comes from their own mouths.
Yeah, and this is unfortunately the reality. I know point number one, the very first point you made, defining atheism as the dictionary defines atheism, there were atheists arguing with that very point, the idea of what an atheist actually means. So let's just lay the ground rules for what we're talking about, because we had atheists on the page arguing atheism is simply a lack of belief. In other words, it's not a positive belief that there are no gods, it's a lack of belief in gods. And to me, it's just, I guess it's kind of comical because I'm going, so you're telling me you don't believe there are any gods? Right. So you're saying that you do not, you're positively asserting that you do not believe there are any gods. That's correct. Well, could there be a God? Well, that's possible. Oh, well, now that's not atheism, that's agnosticism. It reminds me of
Right.
Richard Dawkins when he was questioned and being interviewed about atheism, and he said, "Well, I put it on a scale of, I think it was 1 to 7. One is
Yes.
slightly agnostic, all the way to 7 being atheist." He said, "I'm a 6.9." And
Yes.
the guy said, "So," he said, I'm agnostic, I guess you could say, because I'm not really sure. I can't really be." And the guy said, "But you're known as the world's most famous atheist." And we'll let
Mhm.
Richard expose himself here in just a minute with his own words. But the problem is, Brian, real atheism is the belief, or is the positive assertion that there is no God. You want to talk about that?
Well, I just want to make clear that, like I said before in the other video, and like I clearly state in the article, that's how I am defining atheist. I know there's people online. What I refer to as the internet definition for atheist is that they say I'm an atheist, which just means I lack a belief in the existence of God, but I'm not asserting that I know God doesn't exist, which for the way we talk, that's an agnostic. Like, okay, it's just a change in terminology. How I use the word is not how they use the word, but what we mean and what we're going to mean tonight when we talk about this is somebody who says there is no God, we live in a godless universe. And we're going to say, okay, if that's true, let's see what logically follows. And we're going to hear from their own mouths that the things I've said logically follow from that atheistic starting point they have been saying for many years publicly.
Now, let me also preface this with there are many atheists that would not make that claim. They would not say, or people, I should say it like this, many people that claim atheism that would not say, we know that God does not exist, because they realize it's kind of an absurd position to go to. You really cannot go to that position. And it's still kind of comical to me. It's a video I never even really responded to. There's a video out there that's had over 1 million hits, I believe. Sixth grader something Eric Hovind, and it's the sixth grade kid when he's telling me he knows that God does not exist. And I kind of stopped right there. I was like, well, I don't really need to respond to this because you got a sixth grader saying he knows for sure that God does not exist. And I'm like, you don't even need to, there's no response for that. It's an absurd statement. It kind of displays itself as absurd. So I didn't even respond to that. And the atheist thought, oh man, this sixth grader really got you. And I was like, most of you would not say the statement that he just said, and yet you're thinking, oh, he just got you. So I just thought that was kind of comical.
It's a big, entertaining internet, Eric.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is indeed. Well, we've got several clips as we go through the 15 tenets of atheism. We've got several clips of atheists themselves saying what they think or what they believe. Brian, set us up with this first one here.
All right, so let's just start at the top. Tenet number 1. Things, even if weird to us now, something like a vampire would be something explicable by nature, like maybe a virus. As that's what Hollywood has done. Vampires in Hollywood movies have become some kind of disease that can be spread like a blood-borne virus. And so they've already started to adopt that into their storytelling. And so once you get rid of the supernatural, there's only materialism, meaning things that we don't understand. So we label them miracles or magic until we can understand them. So all of that leads very clearly to determinism. Then you have a deterministic worldview. And that's what the first video is about. This is from a YouTube channel called The Gentleman Thinker. What is determinism?
Gentleman Thinker. Philosophical concepts explained in brief in a posh English accent. Determinism. Determinism is the idea that every event in the universe has a cause, but more than that, those causes necessitate their effects. Given the causes, the effects have to happen. One of the most famous expressions of determinism came from 19th century French scientist Pierre-Simon Marquis de Laplace, who said that if we knew the positions and speeds of every particle in the universe and all the laws that govern them, we would be able to flawlessly predict the future. Though Laplace gets credit for summing up determinism so nicely, the idea goes back at least to ancient Greece. Whether or not he was correct about it is the subject of a great deal of interesting physics and mathematics, but in philosophy, determinism is most often encountered as an apparent challenge to the idea of free will. Subscribe to PhilosophyTube for more from the Gentleman Thinker. Till then, cheerio, old chap!
Well, there you go. Everything, according to atheism, the logical conclusion has been predetermined. And I just want to say, for those of you that are watching right now, some of you are watching on my page or on the what do you call that thing, that watch party. Some of you are watching on other pages. I just want to tell you, the videos that you're about to see get more and more robust in their absurdity as they reveal atheism for what it truly believes. But determinism is the conclusion. If we're just molecules in motion, if that's all that's going on, then everything has already been decided. What's going to happen next year has already been determined, but not by God, and not by God allowing mankind to have choice, but by molecules and chemicals reacting and doing what molecules and chemicals do. And that's it. All you get is determined.
Yes. And so when we look at the universe, sort of Newtonian physics explains if you throw a baseball, using some fairly simple math, I can tell you exactly when and where to land if I know where it's going. So then we've applied that to every living thing, including ourselves, and say, well, if I could know all of the particles in my head, I could predict what they're going to do following that basic physics and know what those thoughts will be that result. Because again, on this view, your thoughts are just your brain, and your brain is just a meat computer. And since matter is explained by the laws of physics, all of your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are totally predictable. And that's what's one of the results of this worldview, is that kind of determinism.
Yeah.
But of course, once you get to that point where your head is just a meat computer, then you're not making choices because you're just matter in motion. The baseball doesn't decide where it's going to land. The atoms that make up cells in your head don't decide what they're going to do. They're following those laws of physics and chemistry. But if your brain and your thoughts and your mind are all just that deterministic matter doing what matter does, because it's just matter inside a head, it doesn't know where it is, it doesn't know it's a brain, it's atoms doing what atoms have to do, then there's no choices being made.
Now,
So that's where this runs into the absence of free will. Like he said, determinism is put up as a challenge to free will, and that leads us to our next video.
Well, hang on just a second. I want to sympathize just a little bit if I can. When you give example after example after example, like on YouTube, there's the guy who made the dartboard that'll almost always hit the target, and he's got all these computers, which is really dope, by the way. I love that.
Yeah.
He's got all these computers showing where it's going to be, the trajectory, the speed, everything else, and the target moves so that the dart hits the bullseye every time. Really, really neat. I love the fact that he's done that, but they've used that same logic and tried to apply that to everything, including people, saying that we don't have, well, and we get into that, they say we don't have free choice, we don't have the ability, it's all planned out, but that's what you were about to set up. So go ahead.
Right, so that's the next video. The Lawrence Krauss and Richard Dawkins, both basically, this is a clip from them on tour just as atheists teaching atheism.
Hold it, one more interruption. If you go back, Kent, to his blog, number 6, the thing as you go down, so everything's predetermined. We just saw that video. Number 6, there is therefore no objective non-physical value. In other words, there's no, everything is just atoms that are dancing. Matter and energy is just doing what it's going to do. There's no inherent or any kind of value in anything. And I think that was an important one that you can go to the article. It's on our homepage at creationtoday.org if you want to check it out, the 15 core tenets of atheism. Now, Brian, you can set up that video.
Okay. This is Lawrence Krauss and Richard Dawkins basically on tour as proselytizers for atheism, preaching from the stage their religion of atheism. And this is a question about free will, because as I say, there's no room in atheism for free will. And that's the question they get from the audience. And so here is Lawrence Krauss and Richard Dawkins addressing the issue of free will from their atheistic worldview.
I suppose, Dr. Dawkins, I would ask this to you. Is there a scientific basis for the concept of free will in human beings? And if not, is there a biological evolutionary reason why all of us believe we have free will?
The late Christopher Hitchens, when asked, does he believe in free will, replied, I have no choice. It's a question that I dread, actually, because I don't have a very well thought out view about it. I think that, I have a materialist view of the world. I think that that things are determined in a rational way by antecedent events. And so that commits me to the view that when I think I have free will, when I think that I'm exercising free choice, I'm deluding myself, that my brain states are determined by physical events. And yet that seems to contradict, to go against the very powerful subjective impression that we all have, that we do have free will. I think all I can do is recommend the works of my colleague Daniel Dennett on the subject, which are fascinating.
And there's a new book by another one of our colleagues, Sam Harris, on free will is coming out. But
yes.
But I also have to agree that I think everything I know about the world tells me that there's no such thing as free will. I just think we act, but the world behaves as if there's free will, and so it doesn't make much difference. Just like the particles in the room, we can discuss them statistically, and they behave as if they can do things that they're not being forced to do. It's just statistics. And we behave as if we have free will because we live in a very complex world where there's so many factors influencing any of our decisions that you can't trace that free will down to its source. And so the difference between a world where we act as if we have free will, or it looks like we have free will, and we really do, in my mind, is so minimal that it's a question for philosophers to worry about, but not me. And maybe with that, Will, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Brian,
We're
take
back.
that away,
Sorry.
man.
So I wanted to draw attention to two of the things that were said in that video. First, Richard Dawkins says, "My brain states are determined by physical events." So again, he's just referring to his mind, his thoughts, just as a series of physical events, meaning that metaphorically, they're just a series of falling dominoes, that it's just matter doing what matter has to do because of the laws of physics and chemistry. Again, predetermined, not just in his own head because of what happened yesterday, but in the universe as this universal machine because of the initial conditions of the Big Bang 13 billion years ago. That's his belief, that whatever initial conditions, the universe came together and those particles were going to wind up in his head doing what they're doing now because of the way that the universe started. But he goes on and says, yet that seems to contradict, to go against the very powerful subjective impression that we all have, that we all do have free will. So he's drawing attention to the fact that all of us have observational, observable, firsthand data, information, observable data that tells us that we do have free will. And then he's answered by Krauss here, who says, everything I know about the world tells me there's no such thing as free will. Now, Krauss has the same firsthand experience that all of us do, that we have free will. But because he is holding on to his dogma, his religious dogma of atheism, he's rejecting that firsthand observable data and doing the anti-science of throwing that out and saying, I'm not even consider that data. I'm just going to say, anything I know tells me we don't have free will. And the data that tells me that I do, which I experience constantly every day, I'm going to throw that out because it doesn't fit my religion. And so I'm showing that, or what they're showing is that Dawkins is naming firsthand observable data, and both of these guys ignore the implications and the data itself because of their faith. And so atheism becomes the anti-science, which in my head explains why evolution maintains. Because if the observations don't fit the religion, you toss out the observations and keep on believing.
And that's exactly what we see. We see them holding on to that dogma. They've been holding on for evolution despite the fact that science has so far blown by over what they're trying to say and what evolution is trying to claim. But they don't care. They're holding on to it really, really tightly. Hey, just real quick, a shout out to Joshua Olson. Thanks for hanging out with me here today, bud. And then Brandon made a comment. I believe it was Brandon. Yeah, Brandon made the comment. It's simple. Nothing exploded and created everything. Christians just don't understand science. Well, Brandon, you just wait, buddy. We've actually got even more videos of these atheists exposing themselves like this. It like I said at the beginning of this episode, it really is sad. It really is sad. But I think it's necessary to show you this because there are a lot of people today going, well, if I can't determine which religion is right, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and I don't want to join one of the cults, the Mormonism or the Jehovah's Witness I don't want to join any of those. That kind of leaves me no option. I guess I might jump into atheism. And then they look at atheism and they go, that doesn't look that good either. This isn't very appealing. It doesn't seem like it comes to logical conclusions. What should I do here? And I'm just telling you, the whole reason we're doing this is to say, first of all, don't walk towards atheism. It doesn't have the, and we're trying to do that in love, but be very honest and let them say that themselves, that it doesn't have the. And then I want you to see that Christianity really does. It's the only worldview that can make sense of the reality that we're in today. A world that is ordered, a world that desires love, that's broken, but desires the love of the Creator. So that's where we're going. Anyway, shout out to Joshua with that as well. So
Excellent. Thanks for watching with us, everybody.
Yeah.
I wanted to make another comment here just to sort of sum up that one of the reasons why people sort of steer toward atheism is that they have been convinced by atheistic marketing that atheism is the religion of science. But as these guys have just shown, it's not science, it's anti-science, that it's not about the observable data, that they are willing to reject observable data if it doesn't fit their faith. So while it's called by atheists the religion of science or the faith of science or faith in science, or I don't have religion, I have science, atheism is anti-science and it's anti-reason, which we will show more in the near future.
And by the way, I know we got another video from Pink talking about this. My friend J. Warner Wallace does, to me, a fantastic job of going through and talking about the difference between the body, the mind, and the soul. And he really lays out an amazing case. This is, if you're probably already familiar with him, Cold Case Christianity is the book he wrote, Homicide Detective. He does a great job of laying out the difference. Matter of fact, if you go to searchcreation.org, that's just searchcreation.org. If you go there, you can do a search, and it searches all the top apologetic websites in the world. And if you just do a search for body, mind, soul, you'll see some great articles that are explaining, look, there really is a difference. And you can tell these are not the same thing. Your physical body, the atoms that make up your physical body are definitely different. And it's been more than proven that it's different than the mind and the soul or the spirit. So anyway, some great resources out there if you want to check that out.
Yeah, and philosophically speaking, this goes back a couple of hundred years at least, because ultimately this comes down to Rene Descartes' I think, therefore I am. We're being told by these atheists, based on their religion, that this self is an illusion, that free will is an illusion. Well, who's being fooled? If there's no self and you can't choose, how can you fool nothing?
Yeah.
Anyway, the next video, let's move on to the next video.
I got to follow up on that now because
Follow up.
when you hear Lawrence Krauss say everything in my experience about, you're going, okay, Lawrence, why would a deterministic worldview, why would it even let your mind try to debate the issue? Why is there a debate going on in your mind if it's a settled thing? The very thought processes going on don't make sense in a deterministic worldview. Now, introduce Mr. Pink.
All right, so Steven Pinker is a cognitive psychologist and a popular science author, and here is a brief video of him again discussing free will, and you're going to see the repeating call to science to prove that free will does not exist.
I don't believe there's such a thing as free will in the sense of a ghost in the machine, a spirit or soul that somehow reads the TV screen of the senses and pushes buttons and pulls levers of behavior. There's no sense that we can make of that. I think our behavior is the product of physical processes in the brain. On the other hand, when you have a brain that consists of 100 billion neurons connected by 100 trillion synapses, there is a vast amount of complexity that means that human choices will not be predictable in any simple way.
And there it is again. He's actually claiming, he's actually coming to the conclusion, look, it's determined. We have no free will. Now, it's just so complex, we can't quite map it out and map what's going to happen. Is that right?
That's basically it. I picked out one particular phrase that I thought kind of summed up where he was going. He says, human behavior will not be predictable in any simple way. And that's kind of the trade-off that this worldview has to have, is that they have to reject the ability to make choices and free will, because all you are is a meat computer. But then they say, well, kind of free will and the fact that we're fooled into thinking we make choices, that's because of the unpredictable nature of the complexity of our brain and our experiences. And that's going to be the thing that you see that comes back again, is that they try to say, well, what we experience as this ability to choose is actually just the complexity of it and the fact that it's not predictable, kind of like, flipping a coin or throwing dice. You don't know what's going to happen. And isn't that kind of the same thing? And ultimately, no, it's not the same thing. What you're saying is that we are just a machine. We're just a complicated machine. But a complicated machine isn't a person. It doesn't make choices. Ultimately, they're losing their humanity here.
And that's what that's exactly what we see. Losing humanity is what you see. We are nothing but an animal. And I've done videos on this. What harm does it do to kill an animal? Now I know the animal rights activists or PETA are going to get mad at me, but I mean, when I saw a possum run over on the road out here, I didn't cry about it. I didn't hold a funeral service. I didn't do anything. When I saw a dead bird out here on the road, I mean, was I sad? Not like I was if it was a human child. and they're taking out the humanity from people and saying that we're just the same as animals. And that leads right to your next point. If atheism is true, atheism exposes itself and says, look, there's really no objective right and wrong. Wait till you see the video. We're not going to show you yet, but wait till you see the video. Number 8 right there. If this is true, there can be no objective right and there cannot be any objective wrong. All there are our opinions. I get debates in debates with atheists with this all the time. They'll say, no, it's your opinion, my opinion. I say, listen, opinions are like armpits. Everybody's got them. Everybody's got them. Most of them stink. Okay, so morality is not just determined by our opinion. That is part of the problem. And that leads right into the number 9 that you have there. There's now no justification for condemning an action as right or wrong. And that doesn't matter whether it means petting a cat nicely or tearing the cat's head off. You can't condemn anything. That doesn't matter if it's being nice to a person or killing a person or torturing a person or enslaving a person. There is no right and wrong is the logical conclusion of atheism. And we got a clip for that. Is that right? You want to talk about that one first? Our friend Frank Turek, who does cross-examine ministry, he did a debate with David Silverman, and I watched this debate probably 3 times. It was amazing to hear David say what he was saying and just vocalizing these thoughts. Well, here, in the comments, you tell us what you think of what David Silverman is saying.
Yeah, but you're confusing the decision with the existence of a moral standard. You're saying that there is no moral standard, or there is a standard objective outside of humanity to which we should obey?
There is no objective moral standard. We are responsible for our own actions.
Responsible to who?
To ourselves and to our society.
Which society? Mother Teresa's or Hitler's?
The society in which we live.
Okay, so
Yes, this is not an easy question.
So at Nuremberg, then, we really had no right to convict the Nazis of obeying their government.
We, as a world society, judge our criminals, and we judge them as we see fit.
I know we judge them, so you're saying we just judge them based on our preferences. You know, in some cultures, they take care of their babies. In other cultures, they eat their babies. Which do you prefer?
I prefer the ones where they take care of the babies. I also prefer the ones where the Nazis don't do terrible things under the name of God.
But it's just a preference.
Yes.
Okay, so
it's an opinion.
Okay, well, if it's just an opinion, you're saying then, if it's just an opinion, I don't know why you condemn a Christian couple for not wanting to put a baby with a homosexual, because that's just their morality that they have every right to express themselves, don't they?
They have every right to do it. I'm saying it's a wholly immoral position.
According to who?
According to me.
Well, okay, well, that's just David
Of course,
Silverman.
it's all according to us. We all make our own moral decisions.
Yeah, I understand.
The only difference between you and me is that I take responsibility for my moral decisions, and you justify your moral decisions by finding a passage in the Bible that matches your moral decisions and saying, aha, it's objective morality.
Well, if there is no objective morality, then we have, it's even hard to talk this way because we say we have no right, but that implies a moral standard too.
No,
See,
we have a societal right. Society
according
gives us the
to
rights.
you, or
according to
Hitler,
society,
or
and according to the government that we create. Yes.
Okay, well, then we had no real way to condemn the Nazis for what they did.
That's the hard answer is you're correct. The hard answer is it is a matter of opinion. The hard answer is they thought they were doing objective good.
And that is the problem. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason I want you to see how atheism is exposing itself, like what you just heard David say right there, there's no way to condemn the Nazis. There's no, I mean, whoever's the strongest is the one who survives. And hey, I guess he's glad he lives in a society for some reason. I don't even know why he's glad. That assumes a standard. But he's glad he lives in a society where we won out over the Nazi regime. He's Jewish. I guess he is kind of glad that he went out, but it's simply the strongest survive, and that's it. There is no objective morality in an atheistic worldview. Let me just tell you something. You and I do not want to live in a world where there is no objective moral standard. I'm going to say that again. You and I do not want to live in a world where there is no objective moral standard. You do not want to live there. I've heard it said that atheism is a great worldview for men ages 18 to 25. Because man, you're in your prime, you're fit, and that's just like, all right, you're good right there.
And you want permission.
It's exactly.
And no judgment.
I think Frank did a great job. He said right there at the beginning, he said, okay, whose society? Mother Teresa's or Hitler's? And that is exactly the point. David is using a moral standard to judge others while at the same time saying there is no moral standard. And to me, that gets right back to the foundation. He knows God in his heart. He actually does have standards. And then he's using the God that he knows that's written on his heart. He's using that to try to judge God, and it leads to absurdity.
Yeah, even though he's not even being entirely consistent, and that's the thing, is he doesn't realize it, he doesn't hear it, but he is condemning something as being objectively wrong, and then saying, but there is no right and wrong. I'm condemning that because that is wholly immoral, he says. But then also says, well, but there is no right and wrong, and it's just our opinion. But not only that, but in order to have an opinion, you're already violating one of the tenets of atheism, because that means you have chosen one thing over another. If he's going to be a consistent atheist, he has to agree that his opinion is merely the way that his brain states have been arranged by pure chance and the laws of physics. He hasn't even made the decision that it would be somehow just or right to let homosexuals adopt. It's just how his brain is accidentally arranged, and it doesn't mean anything. So even having an opinion and giving that some kind of value violates what atheism would force on him if he were honest with it.
And that's why we said in our last video, if atheism is true, atheists don't exist. And they really don't. We'll keep going through this list, but shout out to Rose. Thank you. She said, if we all created our own holy moralities, then there would be no problem with what Hitler did. And you are exactly right. That is one of the problems. Good job, Rose.
That's where it ends
Glad
up.
you guys are seeing that. All right. Sorry, I'm not on the right page here.
I got it. Point number 10 was that life has no particular value. Know that it's wrong to hurt other people, it's wrong to murder. But on this worldview, once you realize that everything is just matter in motion, including humans, then life itself is just a chemical reaction. That a live human being differs from a lit candle only in its complexity. You blow out the candle, you kill the person, you've stopped a chemical reaction. That's all it is. And ultimately, that's why this kind of appeal to atheistic science leads in that direction. So the next video here is called Why Physics Ends the Free Will Debate, and ultimately he's going to admit to just that.
Newtonian determinism says that the universe is a clock, a gigantic clock that's wound up at the beginning of time, and it's been ticking ever since according to Newton's laws of motion. So what you're going to eat 10 years from now, on January 1st, has already been fixed. It's already known using Newton's laws of motion. Einstein believed in that. Einstein was a determinist. Well, does that mean that a murderer, a horrible mass murderer, isn't really guilty of his works because it was already preordained billions of years ago? And Einstein said, well, yeah, in some sense that's true.
Wow. There you go. They're admitting. Once again, these are atheists being exposed in their own words. They're trying to claim that if you just have a physical universe, and this is what they believe, the physical universe is all that exists. Therefore, you can't condemn anything. You can't condemn mass murder. You can't condemn genocide. What's going on in Africa, the genocides that have taken place. You can't condemn that. When I go in my front yard and I take poison and spray it on an anthill, nobody cries about it. And they're saying the same thing should happen when we go and pour poison on a group of people that we think are bothering us. It's the exact same if you hold that worldview consistent.
Now, I'm going to say to their credit, and the distinction between atheists as people professing these things and atheism, the worldview. Atheism, the worldview says, yeah, human beings are just more matter in motion. It doesn't matter if you stop those chemical reactions. But to his credit, this scientist, this theoretical physicist, just referred to it as horrible mass murder. Horrible, why? If it's just the falling of dominoes, one domino knocking into another, what makes that good or bad? Like, he knows mass murder is horrible. And he threw that in without giving it a whole lot of thought, because we all have that God-given conscience that we know there's right and wrong, that when you take them outside of this sort of debate mode where they're thinking about lining up the world with their philosophy, they don't live this way. These men don't go home and kill their own children. they're going to love their wives and children as best as they can, uh, within reason. Although, once you follow this path down, though, that's how the Nazis wound up slaughtering Jews. That's how Planned Parenthood works. As we start talking ourselves further and further down the dark rabbit hole of life has no value, even human life has no value. And so while we're going to debate over what to do with sea turtles and protecting them, we're going to kill our unborn. So there's that part of us made in God's image, but we also, as the Bible tells us, has the ability to sear our conscience until this starts affecting not just how they debate, but how they act. So there's those two edges.
I'm really glad most people that claim atheism that aren't really atheists, that are just agnostic, most people that claim agnosticism, they don't live according to the real worldview of atheism. We've seen what happens when people do that. It is not pretty. And so, atheists, thank you for not being consistent and living consistently with your worldview many times. By the way, my friend Joshua said, and I thought this was kind of funny, he said, atheists are intellectually schizophrenic, and engaging them is like talking to a drunk. And I got to tell you, I almost tried to find a video clip to start this whole conversation with you guys off with, of somebody, I don't know, maybe it's out there, somebody trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. Many times that's what it feels like when you're engaging an atheist, because he'll adopt Christianity to argue against Christianity. He'll adopt the values of the Bible to then argue against the Bible. He'll adopt the fact that truth exists, the idea of God, in order to try to argue against God. And it really can be very frustrating. Now, your and I job, if you're a Christian out there and you're watching this, our job is to be loving and to be kind and realize that if it wasn't for the grace of God in our life, we would be that schizophrenic trying to argue against morality while using morality, trying to argue against logic while using logic, trying to argue against God while using God. So, Josh, great.
Yeah, let me piggyback on that real briefly. Just one of those things that I have to remind myself is that however stupid and self-destructive a worldview is, the people holding that worldview are people that Jesus loves and he died for. And so attacking the worldview is part of our responsibility to help them, but attacking the people is not our job. And so that's one of those things I have to remind myself. And just as a reminder to those of you watching, share the truth, but share it in love. So I'm going to move on to the way that this plays out in terms of analyzing yourself. So once you've looked at the rest of the world and said it's just matter and motion, well, now you turn the gaze on yourself and say, well, what does it mean to be human? Who am I? That leads to point number 11. The self is an illusion.
Okay,
and number
Brian,
12,
I'm going to stop you right there, and I'm going to talk about that. Kent, go to the article there, because I want them to see this. If you go to the page, you'll actually see this self is an illusion. Again, please go to ChristianToday.org, look at this article, and actually study this just a little bit, okay? Because these points really do make sense when you go in order 1 all the way through 15, and we're almost done. But then self is an illusion. Brian, go ahead and talk about that. This is interesting.
Right, that's the thing, is we have the understanding of ourselves. And again, this is the experiential data that Dawkins talked about, that we look at ourselves and we say, I talk about myself in the first person. I am a person observing the world. And everybody has this experience, but it does not fit within the realm of atheism. And so atheists have to look at this experience and say, all right, we're going to reject that data. And according to our belief that all you are is just a collection of atoms obeying the laws of physics and chemistry, there is no you. There's no personhood. Examine your brain. You're not going to find the place where the self is. And so having broken you down into being just a simple machine, it's like, my metaphor is always this. On atheism, you may as well be a toaster. That your brain is more complex than this, but it's exactly the same in the sense that its chemical structure and its physical structure determine everything it does. And that's it. Your brain may as well be a toaster.
All right. I'm a little worried about how much you eat for breakfast in the morning, because that is a little toaster. Indeed. Well, we got a video that is them exposing this in their own words, talking about how the self is an illusion. Your brain actually creates you. Check this out.
Basis for supernatural belief. So, this would have been a good day to return to that. But today I wanted to tell you about a different type of an illusion. One which is actually more pervasive, because it's an illusion shared by believers and non-believers alike. And that is the self-illusion. This idea that we're integrated, coherent individuals who are inside our bodies, somehow operating it almost like a puppet master with kind of coherent thoughts and processes. I'm going to claim that that sense of the self is not what it seems to most of us.
Back to it.
Yeah. All right. This is from The Amazing Meeting. All right. So this is a guy saying your brain creates you at The Amazing Meeting. Brian, tell us about The Amazing.
The Amazing Meeting is one of these annual celebrations of science, skepticism, and critical thinking. This is where unbelievers get together to unbelieve together. It's like Comic-Con for skepticism. But I mean, the marketing's got to be tough. They're like, hey, we're having it again this year. And everyone, if they're sincere, would be like, are you really?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to have to see some evidence that there's like, how do you sell to skeptics? That's got to be hard.
No kidding, man.
Anyway,
well, if you blaspheme God, I know they cheer at that one all the time. All you got to do is blaspheme the Creator, and they love you for it. That's.
So the point is, what's reoccurring here, and what the next video is going to say again, is that we're going to look at ourselves as our mind is just our brain, and our brain is just matter, and so all it is a complex toaster. So the next one is going to say science has discovered that there is no single brain structure that embodies the self. And that ultimately is the point of the next one in rejecting the existence of the self. So the next video is a bit shorter. It's called What is the Self?
But neuroscience today is discovering that there is no single brain structure that embodies the self. And it's pointing to the fact that what is creating the sense of self is a complex mental neurological map allowing us to function as one single organism. Biology tells us that the human body is actually an ecosystem of trillions of bacteria, microbes, viruses, all with their evolutionary agenda. What is then the self, if what I call me is not one organism, but really trillions of different living entities?
So, what are you if it's that? And there's so much I mean, we could talk about each one of these videos, but this is, again, them exposing themselves. I thought it was interesting. First of all, he said it creates something, which is an interesting word. Anytime I hear atheists use the word create, because that would be impossible if everything is determined. And then the very idea that what we think of as ourselves doesn't really exist inside. I go, at the very beginning there, he had me. He's right. You are not just simply your body or your molecule.
It's part of the trick is they do occasionally say things that are true and make sense. I mean, for instance, the space that you take up actually has more bacteria than it has human cells if you're just counting cell for cell. But then to say, okay, you're just a zoo of different cells all fighting for their evolutionary niche, that again just rejects what does it mean to be human and makes you a pile of cells, and cells are just chemical factories made out of atoms. And so it's really just atheism showing that it dissolves what it means to be human into something meaningless.
Well, we got another video from Sam Harris, and honestly, guys, when I started getting into this and started debating atheists years ago, I found myself going, listen, if Christianity is true, it has to take on the toughest critics. Surely atheists would be the toughest critics. So I started reading and listening to and watching atheist videos, books, podcasts, things like that. And all of atheist objections to God are really objections against the wrong God. And so many times I find them making arguments against things that are in religions or things that, like hypocrisy and things like that, that I go, you're right. You're right. You're right. However, to come to the conclusion that therefore there is no God, I go, whoa. Wrong conclusion. Appreciate what you said here. Your conclusion on the matter is very, very wrong. And I got to pick on him. I had lunch, or I guess you'd call it a brunch, with the friendly atheist, Mr. Hemant Mehta, a couple months ago. And I see this on his blog all the time. Somebody who would try to wonder about objective morality and then call things wrong all the time. And so anyway, appreciate some things that they point out, but man, conclusion, there is no God, wrong conclusion. So Sam Harris has a video on this as well, that the self, you, are an illusion. Check it out.
I'm not arguing that consciousness is a reality beyond science or beyond the brain, or that it floats free of the brain at death. I'm not making any spooky claims about its metaphysics. What I am saying, however, is that the self is an illusion. The sense of being an ego, an I, a thinker of thoughts in addition to the thoughts, an experiencer in addition to the experience. That the sense that we all have of riding around inside our heads as a kind of a passenger in the vehicle of the body. That's where most people start when they think about any of these questions. Most people don't feel identical to their bodies. They feel like they have bodies. They feel like they're inside the body, and most people feel like they're inside their heads. Now that sense of being a subject, a locus of consciousness inside the head, is an illusion. That is, it makes no neuroanatomical sense. There's no place in the brain for your ego to be hiding. We know that everything you experience, your conscious emotions and thoughts and moods and the impulses that initiate behavior, all of these things are delivered by myriad different processes in the brain that are spread out over the whole of the brain, that they can be independently erupted. We have a changing system. We are a process. And there's not one unitary self that's carried through from one moment to the next, unchanging.
Self is an illusion. You think you're there, you're not really there.
So let me call attention to a couple of the things he said there that really put a point on it. He said that sense of being a subject, a locus of consciousness inside a head, is an illusion. He's saying that when you say I of yourself, you're just wrong. You've been fooled. And again, my question is, if I'm fooled into thinking I'm a self, who's being fooled?
Yeah.
How does a not self get fooled into thinking it's a self?
You're fooling yourself when there's no self to fool. That's great. I love it.
I feel like that idea commits suicide right away. But again, he reflects the exact same idea the last video did. He says there's no place in the brain for your ego to be hiding, which means, yes, there's no physical structure of the brain that is that self, that first person awareness. But that doesn't make it go away. We still have that. And so what that ultimately points to pretty clearly is that our self is more than just our physical brain. We are, in a sense, spiritual, made in the image of God. We're not just this physical stuff. And then at the end here, he really brings the point home that the self is an illusion and says, we are a process. There is no one unitary self that is carried from one moment to the next and changing. That what you are is just a collection of constantly changing matter. And the collection of matter you are today is different than it was yesterday. And in 10 years, it'll be a completely different collection of matter. And so there is no sense in atheism wherein you are a continuing thing. You are a momentary collection of matter that changes, and the next collection is a different you, and you are an illusion that you are being fooled into thinking. It just dissolves.
Now, I should have known. You put a video in here that I guess takes me back. It tells me a little bit about you, Brian, a guy who taught science but also taught theater. You had to get Kermit the Frog in here, didn't you?
I did. Please bring that on.
I just love all your wild characters, Peter. But, backstage here, you can just relax and be yourself.
But that, you see, my dear Kermit, would be altogether impossible. I could never be myself.
Never yourself?
No. You see, there is no me. I do not exist.
I beg your pardon. Yes?
There used to be a me, but I had it surgically removed.
There used to be a me. Yeah. So 30 years ago, Brian, we laughed at this idea that there used to be a me. There is no me. Now this is kind of mainstream science.
Yes. What used to be a punchline on the Muppet Show is now being peddled by atheism as science. And that, I think, says more than anything.
Well, here's where we have to go. And Kent, I'm going to have you get to that page again to let them see our list here. If there's no real self, then there's no basics for logic or rational thought. You cannot have thought or reasoning if there's no the ability to think, if there's no free will. You can't even, and there's no self, you can't even think. You don't really exist if atheism is true. And kind of can't wait to get to the end here with this. We'll get there in just a second. This last video that I've got. But if this is true, then there is no self, there is no you. And I think that the atheists themselves have very clearly demonstrated this is really what they believe. So those of you that are atheists that are going to get on our Facebook page and argue with us about this, you got to understand, we're taking atheists for what they actually say, what they're actually communicating. We're not painting a straw man with this at all. Toaster, I got it.
So again, your brain, like the toaster, sensory input, lever down, it does what it has to do, toast up. Sensory input from the world, your brain does what it has to do. Your opinion forms by changing the chemistry in your head. That's not logic and reason. On atheism, what your brain does is no different than this. It's just more complicated, but it's the exact same process. So there is no thinking, there is no logic. And you don't have to take our word for it, but here's another video where an atheist essentially acknowledges that you can use science to show that logic doesn't hold.
To reason, much less to provide a refutation of the case. So the person who denies logic is in the position of using logic to deny logic, which is simply self-defeating.
It is. Oh, did we not have the rest of that clip? I guess that one got cut off because the guy comes back on. We must have...
Well, I can tell you what he says. I wrote down some good quotes for it. So the first person who spoke there is William Lane Craig, and he's debating an atheist. And William Lane Craig is saying that if you don't adhere to the laws of logic, you can't even make the case against logic. And the guy comes back and says he's trying to make his case from the quantum level. So the quantum level is you take atoms, and they're made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. Now you take one of those things and you take it apart to its parts, and then take those parts and take them apart. You get to this tiny, tiny super microscopic level below the atom. And at that point, science seems to be saying right now that it doesn't work according to the laws of Newtonian physics. So the laws that govern what a baseball does when I throw it doesn't work the same at that level. But what this guy is trying to do is extrapolate and say, well, there are no rules at that level. So at the quantum level, the universe has no laws at all. There's not even logic at that level. And what he says is, it is a simple observational fact. He says about the quantum level, quote, "The laws of logic as we know them do not hold. This is a fact. This is a scientific fact," end quote. And my thought is, so he's saying science can observe a lack of logic.
That's a problem.
And this just shows me yet again that atheism forces the divorce of science and logic. As much as atheism tries to sell itself as a religion of science, atheism is anti-science. It divorces science and logic, and science just becomes a label that you slap on nonsense.
I got to tell you, I watched my friend Cy Ten Bergenkate from ProofThatGodExists.org rake people over the coals with this thing over and over in Christian love, and he would constantly try to show them this. We did this debate. It was called The Unbelievable Debate because it's a conversation that he first had on Justin Briley's program, the Unbelievable Radio program, and we did 2 more debates with this guy, Paul Baird. And Paul Baird was saying the laws of logic do not exist, and including we were talking about the law of non-contradiction. And Cy responded with, "So you're telling me they do exist?" And Paul Baird said, "No, they do not exist." And Cy said, "So they do exist?" He said, "No, they do not exist." He said, "So they do exist." And I don't know if Paul ever got it. If the laws of logic don't exist, you can contradict him, and it is also true. That's the problem. It's absurd to come to these kind of conclusions where the laws of logic now do not exist. That's where you have to go if you adopt the materialistic, atheistic, deterministic, no free will worldview.
Yeah, so again, to bring home my metaphor, the toast that pops up is not true or false. It's just what happens because of the chemical structure and physical structure of this object. Your brain similarly input in, processes according to what it has to do, and ideas pop out. So there is no logic, there's no reason, there's no free will. How can there be any true or false? Ideas themselves become meaningless. That your thoughts all become the toast that pops out of your toaster or the fizz on your diet cherry Pepsi. And that brings us to point 14.
That's what I was going to say. Point number 14.
Yeah,
go ahead, give it to him because this is the punchline.
Yeah, if you can't do the logic, if you can't make the choices, you can't know anything.
Correct.
All you can have are certain arranged brain states, a certain arrangement of the chemicals in your head. Like Dawkins said at the beginning, it's just chemical brain states that are predetermined by other physical factors. But to call that knowledge is presuming that we can step outside of that brain and use choice and logic and reason to examine the ideas in your brain, which is impossible on the atheistic worldview. So you can't know anything on atheism.
So this is interesting because I was actually at the debate that Sides and Pergnicate did with Matt Dillahunty, and here you had a room of majority atheists, very few Christians in this room, and all Side did was showed what Matt believes, and Matt's conclusion is he makes fun of these people called solipsists, people that say we can't know anything. And then he admits on his own program, and Sai shows a video of it, hey, Matt says, I'm kind of a solipsist. I really can't know anything. And Sai's going, and you want me to debate somebody? You want me to have a debate with somebody who says, I can't know anything? There's no need for a debate. If you can't know anything, I mean, think about it. When you get somebody to this point, and this is what I do in my Mind of the Skeptic talk, when you get someone to the point where they're always saying, I could be wrong about everything, I don't know anything, the debate's over. There's no more discussion. Their worldview is done, complete, finished. So really, you ought to check that out. And then he did a documentary debating Dillahunty. And let's see here, How to Answer the Fool. You got to watch How to Answer the Fool. And it really exposes this for what it is. I had one more. I did that one with Thunderfoot. Now, this is kind of funny. We're at the Reason Rally. Is this a good time? Should I share this story right before?
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah.
Okay. So we're at the Reason Rally in Washington, D.C. And I'm there walking around and I'm looking for atheists to talk to. And I find this guy named Thunderfoot. He's a famous YouTube atheist, makes videos that make fun of the Bible. I end up having over an hour-long conversation with him. And towards the beginning of the conversation, he admits, and I knew he would, and it took him a little while. If you watch the conversation, I had to ask the question multiple times, but he finally admits that this is his worldview. Kent, let's show what Thunderfoot believes. Could you be wrong about everything you think you know?
It's conceivable the universe doesn't exist.
There we go. He said, it's conceivable that the universe itself does not exist. And I went, now you're going to try to argue with me that the Bible's wrong, that there's contradictions in the Bible and that God may not exist, when you are saying it's conceivable that the universe does not exist. Are you kidding me? Are you serious here? So that is the conclusion of atheism. You don't know anything at all.
Oh, I've got one more video on the list that basically says what Thunderfoot there said, but tries to use science to prove that the universe doesn't exist. And of course, the reason why is this is an atheist trying to say, well, the universe doesn't need a creator because a creator would have to create something, and the universe is nothing, therefore it didn't need a creator.
But remember, you're only laughing, Brian, because you think logic exists. And that's only funny if logic exists. Logic doesn't exist, so that's not very funny, right? That's the problem.
You got to see it to believe it. If I made this up, I wouldn't believe it. But show the people the atheist from his own mouth.
At the creation, no charge separated into opposite charges. Nothing separated into opposites. Secondly, and more potently, how much material is there in the universe? Another way to answer this question is to ask how much energy there is in the universe. For Einstein showed that mass and energy are equivalent. When the sum is done, and that involves adding together all the masses of all the protons, all the people, all the priests, all the planets, all the stars and all the galaxies, as well as the gravitational attraction between them, the answer is close to zero. I suspect that as observations are refined, the total will approach zero. There is no energy in the universe. Nothing did indeed come from nothing. Science shows that the universe is in fact a big confidence trick. There is truly nothing here. All there is a separation of opposites.
Wow. All there is, Brian, is a separation of opposites. There really is nothing here.
Right.
Nothing
And
to
I've
see
heard
here.
multiple.
I should be able to go rob a bank right now and just say, nothing to see here, nothing to see here, nothing to see here. Guys, there's nothing to see here. You should be able to go do whatever you want and just say, nothing to see here, guys, nothing to see here.
I have heard multiple atheists use this argument in saying that, well, we can prove that we don't need a creator by proving that the universe doesn't exist, which is just a horrible stretch of logic in any direction. But again, in order to defend atheism, you wind up at absurdity. You have to deny that you exist. And why not deny the universe exists? If you're not there, why does it matter where you are?
Hey, shout out to my friend Trish, who I know as Fish with Trish. Love the evangelism that she's done for years and years and years. They got a great ministry, I believe, her and her husband's ministry. Don't kill me if I'm wrong on this. Red Grace Media. I think I've got that right. That was off the top of the head. Thank you for hanging out with me, Trish. Hey, I want to wrap this up here. The tenets of atheism are. It's, by the way, this is available at creationtoday.org. The 15 core tenets of atheism. 1 through 15, these are a logical flow of what would happen if atheism were true, all the way down to the number 14 is there is no ability to have knowledge, which means there really is no existence at all, which was the conclusion that you just heard. I'm pretty sure that was David Attenborough that we just watched that clip of, but
I believe so.
don't quote me on that one. But that means nothing exists. The universe does not exist, therefore atheists do not exist. So if atheism is true, atheists do not exist. Now, I want to reiterate what I said at the beginning. If you're an atheist, or you're somebody who's considering atheism, or you're just looking at the landscape of worldviews and going, gosh, which is it? Is it one of the religions? Is it Christianity, Islam, Mormonism, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, or is it one of the cults? Do one of the cults have it right, like the Mormonism or the Christian Science, or the Scientology, or the Jehovah's Witness, or if it's not one of those, if I can't get something settled there, maybe atheism. I'm just telling you, don't jump into atheism. It doesn't make sense. And we can do the same for the other religions. And I love doing this, especially when you have tragedies that happen. We just had a tragedy here in Pensacola with an active shooter. When tragedies happen, let me tell you, Christianity is the only worldview that can hold water. It's the worldview that you're going to want to find yourself running true. See, if Buddhism is true, Buddhism also teaches that everything is an illusion, that what you're going through isn't really real. That doesn't do a lot of good. When the hurricane went through Panama City next door to Pensacola here, it wouldn't have done any good to go over there to the people that lost their houses and the people that lost family members and said, hey, don't worry, suffering is just an illusion. It's not really happening. Hinduism wouldn't have helped either. Hinduism teaches the idea of karma. Hey, what goes around comes around. And Hinduism wouldn't have been any good to go over there in Panama City and say, you guys deserve this. All you guys must have done something in a past life, and this is how the universe is getting back at you. That's not satisfying. It doesn't help, and it's not explanatory. Atheism says molecules are just in motion. That's just what happened. They made a bumper sticker about that and sold quite a few of them. Stuff happens, and that's just what happened to you. The universe is just in motion. Keep following that down, and the universe doesn't exist, as we just saw David Attenborough say. Hey, the worldview that your heart longs for, the hurt that you're going through, the pain that you experience, whether that's relational pain with a husband or a wife or children or parents or friends, or it's physical pain that your body is going through because of disease or because of something you're going through, I promise that's because of a broken creation. The Bible tells us very clearly that God created a perfect heaven and a perfect earth, put man in it and said, you get to choose your will or my will. And they said, thank you very much, God, we'll choose our will. And sin entered creation at that point, and death came with it. Death came as a result of sin. And now the Bible describes the entire creation groaning and travailing in pain, waiting for its redemption, waiting for Christ to come and redeem. And so, guys, I want to tell you, that's the worldview. Christianity is the worldview that really makes sense of today. Creation is what can make sense of today. That's why our ministry is called Creation Today. We've got to go back to the beginning if we're going to understand right now, and we're going to understand what happens in the future. Hey, that creation worldview tells us of the Creator who came to be the Savior of mankind. And if you've never found a relationship with God, a relationship with your Maker, the one who created you, I want to encourage you to do that, and I want to encourage you to do that today. We got a brand new thing that we just launched, and I know I didn't buy your coffee, but I'd love it if you'd check out the website. It's called, let me grab one of these cards, Why I Bought Your Coffee. And this is just a simple card. You buy somebody's coffee. If you're a Christian, this is what you do. You go out and buy somebody's coffee, and on the back it just says, Why I Bought Your Coffee. And when people go to whyiboughtyourcoffee.com, it just tells you a story, and it gives you a beautiful gospel message. So if you don't know if you have a relationship with Christ, can I encourage you, even though I haven't bought your coffee yet, come to Pensacola, I'll buy it. Go check out whyiboughtyourcoffee.com or go to creationtoday.org under the About section, How to Be Saved, an article written by Mark Spence and myself that just lays out how you can know for sure you're on your way to heaven. Hey, Brian, I want to thank you for hanging out with me today, bud.
My pleasure. It's always a good time.
Hey, today's show is brought to you by Third Day Coffee. Really excited about this. Third Day Coffee, you get to share the gospel with every single sip, and all the profits, 100% of the profits, go to support Why I Bought Your Coffee. If you go to thirddaycoffee.org, you'll check out, you go to the shop, you'll see this really cool gift set that they've got right now. They roast on the weekends and ship on Mondays, so anybody who places an order for Third Day Coffee, either the really cool gift package that we've got there, and each kind of coffee is one of the days of creation. So day 1, of course, is Let There Be Light. Day 6 is when animals were made, including T-Rex. So we've got the T-Rex blend. Day 7, the day God rested. That's our decaf blend. So check out thirddaycoffee.org and get a gift for somebody this Christmas, knowing that every single sip is sharing the gospel of Jesus. Hey, thank you guys for joining me. Brian, thank you for hanging out with me. I appreciate it. For everybody on Facebook or on our what's it called? Our website watching this, thank you guys so much. Look forward to seeing you next time.